She walked in 12 minutes late, drenched by the Philadelphia rain, her hands shaking hard enough to betray every fear she was trying to hide. Then Roman Vale, the most feared man in the room, took one look at her and shut down a meeting worth millions. Have you ever entered a place already certain everyone had decided who you were before you spoke? Claire Bennett had spent 8 years building a flawless reputation, and now one ruined morning threatened to erase it. Outside, thunder rolled over the Delaware River. Inside, 16 powerful men watched her cross the polished floor as if weakness had just walked through the door. But Roman did not see weakness. He saw something no one else understood yet. Stay to the end, because this is not only a story about danger and desire. It is about what happens when the wrong person notices the strength you were forced to hide. Like the video and comment where you are watching from. The room had not seen weakness walk through its doors. It had seen a woman who had already been given a dozen reasons to turn back, and had refused every one of them. 45 minutes earlier, Claire Bennett stood beneath the steel tracks of the Market-Frankfurt line with rain striking her face like thrown gravel. Above her, the rails groaned in the wind. A stalled train sat somewhere between stations, dark windows holding hundreds of passengers who had stopped believing the delay announcement. Water spilled from the edge of the platform roof and struck the pavement in heavy silver ropes. Tires hissed across Market Street. Umbrellas bent backward. A city bus passed too close to the curb and sent a gray wave over the shoes of 3 people waiting beside her. Claire checked her phone again. The service alert had not changed. Electrical failure near 15th Street. All eastbound service suspended until further notice. The meeting began in 34 minutes. She stared at the words as if concentration could force the system to repair itself. Her car was sitting inside a garage in Fishtown with a failed starter. The mechanic had promised to call before noon, which Claire had learned usually meant sometime before the end of the week. Her first rideshare driver had canceled after keeping her beneath the tracks for 9 minutes. The second appeared on the map 3 blocks away, turned south, and continued moving in the opposite direction. Claire pressed the call button. A man answered over loud music. "I am standing at the pickup point. I am coming. You are driving away from me. Traffic redirected me. The destination is east. I know the city." On the screen, his car crossed another intersection in the wrong direction. Claire ended the call and canceled the ride. A fee appeared instantly. For one hot second, she imagined throwing the phone into traffic. Instead, she closed her eyes. Inhale for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. It was a habit she had built during years of interpretation. When a room became chaotic, the interpreter could not join the chaos. She had to create a private chamber inside her mind, quiet enough to receive one language without letting fear contaminate the next. Claire opened her eyes. The rain had found the space beneath her collar. She called Keystone Language Partners. Rachel Monroe answered after the 5th ring. "Please tell me you are already there." Claire turned away from the wind and pressed one finger against her other ear. "Public transportation has declared war on me." There was a pause. Keyboard keys clicked rapidly on Rachel's end. "You are on the Vale assignment. I know which assignment I am on. They said 9 sharp. I understand what sharp means." Rachel lowered her voice. "This client is not like the others." Claire looked at the rainwater rushing along the gutter. "Every client becomes special when the invoice has enough zeros." "I am serious, Claire. So am I. Who exactly am I walking in to work for?" Another pause. Not the distracted pause Rachel used while checking a schedule. This one was careful, controlled. "You have the address. I asked for the client's name. You have what compliance approved us to give you." Claire watched a delivery truck crawl through the intersection. "Rachel, just get there. Do not ask questions you were not hired to translate." The line went dead. Claire lowered the phone slowly. Rachel usually ended calls with 3 reminders. Submit your invoice by Friday. Protect all client materials. Call if the meeting extends beyond the scheduled block. This time, she had ended the conversation like someone closing a door before a sound escaped through it. Claire opened the original assignment email. It contained 6 short lines, English and Spanish interpretation. Executive freight negotiation. Strict confidentiality. Vale Tower. 61st floor. 9 in the morning sharp. The rate was nearly twice what Keystone normally paid her. No company name appeared in the subject line. No list of participants had been provided. The attached documents were redacted so heavily that entire paragraphs looked like black walls. The visible portions concerned port priority, inland distribution, warehouse access, customs inspections, exclusivity periods, and liability across American and Mexican jurisdictions. The work itself did not frighten her. Claire had interpreted pharmaceutical acquisitions in rooms where one wrong adjective could change the value of a patent. She had worked labor arbitrations where anger moved through the room like heat. She had sat between attorneys who smiled politely while trying to bury each other beneath language no ordinary person would recognize as a threat. She understood how powerful people spoke when they wanted cruelty to sound procedural. She understood how lawyers stretched harmless words until they became doors. She understood that silence could be a demand. She also understood that politeness often arrived moments before an attack. Claire had spent 6 hours preparing the night before. At her dining table, beneath the yellow light of a single lamp, she had reviewed shipping terminology until after midnight. She had compared legal usage in American English with commercial Spanish used in Mexico. She had made handwritten notes on the distinctions between suspension termination, withdrawal revocation, and cancellation. She had drawn lines between related clauses. She had marked phrases that carried different legal weight depending on the jurisdiction. She had memorized abbreviations that would never appear in a normal conversation. At 1 in the morning, she had closed her laptop and placed her notebook beside the dark green dress hanging from her bedroom door. Everything had been ready. At 6:10, Claire had woken before the alarm. Her apartment near the elevated tracks was still dark. A freight train moved somewhere beyond the windows, making the glass tremble softly in its frame. She made coffee at half a piece of toast and reviewed the opening terminology while standing at the kitchen counter. Before leaving, she checked the portfolio 3 times. Identification, notebook, printed contract pages, backup pens, portable charger, a small packet of throat lozenges. The habits looked excessive to other people. To Claire, they were insurance against becoming the easiest person in the room to blame. At 7:32, she locked her apartment door. At 7:41, she reached the train platform. At 7:46, the first delay notice appeared. She still had time. At 7:54, the notice changed from delayed to suspended. By 8:03, the platform had filled with office workers staring at their phones and calculating which apology would sound least like an excuse. Claire watched one woman remove her heels and begin walking toward the stairs in stocking feet. For a moment, Claire almost laughed. Then her first driver canceled. The morning did not collapse all at once. It narrowed around her one small failure at a time, each one stealing another minute until the careful space she had built around the assignment disappeared. Her shoes waited beneath the chair. Her portfolio held printed copies of every visible contract section. Her coat had been brushed clean. Her alarm had been set early enough to leave 40 minutes of extra travel time. Preparation was how Claire kept the world from deciding who she was before she had a chance to speak. At 21, she had believed qualifications would be enough. She had sat across from a senior partner at one of Philadelphia's most respected language firms, wearing a navy suit purchased with nearly all the money left from graduation. 3 professors had written recommendations for her. Her transcript showed near-perfect marks. She had completed advanced certification earlier than anyone else in her class. The senior partner praised her fluency. He praised her memory. He praised her ability to preserve tone under pressure. Then he folded his hands and smiled. Our executive clients need someone with more natural authority in the room. Claire had understood. Older, male, a deeper voice, broader shoulders. Someone men in expensive suits would assume belonged beside them before he had demonstrated anything. She thanked the partner for his time. She walked 3 blocks to the train. She did not cry until the doors closed. That night, she opened a new notebook and wrote a sentence across the first page. Competence survives longer than prejudice, but only if you keep showing up. For 8 years, she treated every assignment like evidence. She arrived early. She researched beyond what the client provided. She never repeated confidential conversations. Even when friends asked for harmless details, she never guessed when precision was possible. She never allowed an insult to alter the sound of her voice. She had built her reputation one accurate sentence at a time. Now the clock on her phone read 8:31. A yellow cab turned onto Market Street with its roof light on. Claire stepped beyond the shelter of the tracks and raised one hand. The driver almost passed her. He hit the brakes and stopped near the curb. Claire opened the back door and slid inside. Vale Tower, south entrance. The driver looked at her through the mirror. Center City is locked, I can see that. 25 minutes. I have 28. He shrugged and pulled into traffic. Claire placed the leather portfolio on her lap and watched Philadelphia move past through rain-streaked glass. The city looked stripped of color. Stone buildings faded into low cloud. Traffic lights glowed against wet pavement. People hurried beneath umbrellas with shoulders raised, each of them fighting a private battle against the weather. Claire checked the time at 8:36, then 8:41, then 8:47. Traffic stopped 4 blocks from Vale Tower. A delivery truck had blocked one lane. A police cruiser angled across another. Drivers leaned on their horns as though noise could create space where none existed. Claire looked through the windshield. The tower rose beyond the intersection, a column of dark glass disappearing into the storm. I will walk. The driver glanced back. In this I am already late. You are not late yet. Claire looked at the clock. Give it a minute. She paid, stepped into the rain, and began to run. Her heels struck the wet pavement unevenly. She held the portfolio beneath her coat and kept one hand over the opening at her throat. Wind drove cold water against her face. The south entrance was less than 3 blocks away. If security was quick, she could still reach the elevator by 9. A black sport utility vehicle entered the intersection too fast. Its right tires cut through a flooded section of the street. Claire saw the water rise before she could turn. The wave struck her from shoulder to knee. Cold shocked the breath from her lungs. She staggered beneath the awning of a closed bank and pressed one hand against the stone wall. Water ran from the hem of her coat. Her dress clung to her left side. One shoe felt full. Across the street, the vehicle continued without slowing. For several seconds, the city seemed to go quiet. The rain still struck glass, brakes still squealed. A siren sounded somewhere near the river. But inside Claire, something stopped. She looked down at herself. She imagined entering a private tower dressed like this. She imagined the receptionist's face. She imagined an executive checking his watch. She imagined a message reaching Rachel before lunch. Unprofessional, unprepared, not suited for executive work. The words came easily because Claire had heard versions of them before. She could turn around. She could call Keystone and explain the transit failure. She could take photographs of the flooded street. She could produce timestamps and canceled rides. Every fact would be true. None of them would walk into the meeting and do the work for her. Claire closed her eyes. The old sentence returned. Competence survives longer than prejudice, but only if you keep showing up. She pushed away from the wall. You can be embarrassed after you finish. The words disappeared into the rain. Claire crossed the street. The clock above the lobby security desk read 9:04 when she entered Vale Tower. The lobby was enormous and almost empty, a polished cavern of black marble pale stone and brushed steel. A silver sculpture rose from the center like twisted blades. Security gates lined the far wall. Behind them, private elevators waited beneath glowing floor numbers. The soles of Claire's shoes squeaked against the marble. A guard behind the nearest desk looked first at her wet coat, then at her face. Name: Claire Bennett, contract interpreter, 61st floor. He searched the screen. Nothing in his expression changed, but he looked at her again. Identification. Claire handed him her license. He studied it, typed something, then lifted a phone. Claire glanced at the clock. 9:06. The guard spoke too quietly for her to hear. He listened. His eyes moved toward her. Yes, he said. She is here now. The emphasis settled between Claire's shoulders. The guard ended the call and returned her license. Elevator 6. Thank you. No phone calls on the floor. No photographs. Do not enter any room except the conference room. Understood. He did not tell her where the conference room was. The gate opened. Claire walked toward elevator 6. The doors opened immediately. Every surface inside was mirrored. For the first time since leaving the cab, she saw the full damage. Her hair had escaped the careful twist at the back of her head. Rain had flattened one side and curled the other. Her mascara had survived, but barely. The green dress was almost black from shoulder to thigh on the left side. Her coat looked as though she had slept in it. Claire opened her bag and found a small makeup case. The elevator began to rise. She reapplied lipstick with one hand. The first attempt was uneven. She wiped it away with a tissue. The second looked worse. Claire stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked exhausted, angry, and afraid. She looked nothing like the calm, professional image Claire had spent 8 years constructing. The floor numbers climbed. 39, 47, 54. Claire closed the makeup case. She pressed both hands against the edge of the narrow metal shelf beneath the mirror until her fingers stopped trembling. "Walk in," she whispered. Her reflection watched her. "Do the work." The elevator passed 58. Break later. The doors opened. A silent hallway stretched toward a pair of dark walnut doors. 2 men waited beside them. One checked his watch. "You are 12 minutes late." Claire stepped out of the elevator. "I noticed." The man's expression remained hard. "Mr. Vale notices everything." Claire tightened her grip on the portfolio. "Then he will notice whether I can do the job." The second man touched his earpiece. He listened. Then he opened the conference room doors. Voices stopped. 16 men turned. Claire stepped forward, carrying 8 years of work into the silence. The conference room seemed larger from the doorway. A long walnut table stretched toward the windows, its surface crowded with contracts, tablets, untouched coffee, and glasses of water. Beyond the glass, the Delaware River lay beneath the storm like a sheet of beaten metal. 16 men watched her cross the polished floor. Some looked at the clock. Others looked at the dark water staining her dress. A silver-haired man near the center leaned back in his chair. His navy suit fit perfectly. His expression had the patient disapproval of someone who had learned to make humiliation sound professional. I was beginning to wonder whether Keystone understood the meaning of confidential. Claire knew the type. Men like him rarely raised their voices. They preferred to make the room participate in the punishment. She kept walking. At the far end of the table stood Roman Vale. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, exposing dark ink beneath the fabric. One hand rested against the back of his chair. The other hung loose at his side. He did not look at the clock. He did not look at the water dripping from Claire's coat. He looked at her hands. Claire reached the interpreter's station beside the table and placed her portfolio down. Her fingers shook as she reached for her pen. The pen slipped. It struck the floor with a small, sharp sound. No one spoke. Claire bent to retrieve it. Before she could straighten, Roman's voice crossed the room. "Stop the meeting." The silver-haired man turned toward him. "Roman, my representatives came from Houston and Veracruz for this session." Roman kept his eyes on Claire. "Clear the room." No one moved at first. The silence changed. It became the silence of men waiting to see whether a command had been misunderstood. A dark-haired attorney seated near Roman closed his folder. The others followed. Chairs moved back. Assistants gathered documents. The silver-haired man remained seated. "Is there a problem?" Roman finally looked at him. "There will be if you are still sitting there when I count to 5. The man stood before Roman reached 1. Within a minute, the room had emptied. The walnut doors closed. Claire remained beside the interpreter's station, one hand resting on the portfolio. Rain struck the windows. Roman walked toward her. He stopped several feet away. The distance felt deliberate. "You came into my meeting 12 minutes late. My train stopped. You are soaked. A vehicle found the deepest puddle in Philadelphia. You were shaking when you walked through that door." Claire raised her chin. I still walked through it. Something shifted near Roman's mouth. It was not a smile. Not yet. "Who hired you, Keystone Language Partners? Who contacted you, Rachel Monroe, when yesterday afternoon?" His attention sharpened. "What time? 4:15. Roman took out his phone. He sent a message with one hand. The reply arrived almost immediately. He read it without changing expression. The original interpreter withdrew at 8 yesterday morning. Claire looked toward the closed doors. "I was told it was a last-minute scheduling issue." It was. That does not explain the delay. No. The cold fabric against Claire's skin suddenly seemed less important. "Do you think someone placed me here?" Roman put the phone away. "I think someone wanted an unknown person close enough to hear everything said at that table." Claire looked at the contracts. "Then replace me." Roman studied her. "You want to leave, I want you to decide whether I am qualified based on my work, not based on whoever arranged the assignment. Most people would spend the next 5 minutes explaining why none of this was their fault. It is not my fault, no, but it is my problem. Claire opened the portfolio. Inside were her notes, printed pages, and terminology sheets. Roman's gaze moved over the columns of English and Spanish terms. You prepared this overnight. I received the materials after 4. That was not my question. Yes. Roman turned one page. Claire had grouped terms by subject: port access, customs inspection, cargo loss, suspension rights, governing language. You reviewed both versions. I was hired to interpret both languages. Most interpreters would prepare from the spoken agenda. Most people read what they expect to hear. Roman looked up. And you, I prepare for what someone hopes I miss. For the first time, amusement touched his eyes. You know who I am. I know your name. That is not the same thing. It was enough to explain the security downstairs. You can leave. Claire's fingers tightened around the edge of the portfolio. You will still be paid. She thought of the rain. She thought of the interview 8 years earlier. She thought of the senior partner who had decided she lacked authority before hearing her work. Then she looked at Roman. I prepared for this meeting. That is not an answer. Yes, it is. Roman stood very still. Claire removed her wet coat. She folded it over the back of the chair. I am staying. Roman looked at her for several seconds. Then he checked his watch. You have 45 seconds. For what to become ready? Claire adjusted the headset. She opened the contract to the first marked page. She uncapped her pen. I do not need 45. Roman walked toward the head of the table. Before he sat, he stopped. If anyone asks why I cleared the room, you say nothing. I was not planning to issue a statement. His gaze returned to her. Miss Bennett. Yes, do not mistake the absence of visible danger for safety. Claire held his eyes. Do not mistake wet clothes for incompetence. The room went still again. Roman pressed the control beside his chair. The doors opened. The men returned in quiet groups. The silver-haired negotiator entered last. His eyes moved from Roman to Claire, measuring the space between them as if it might reveal something useful. He took his seat. The dark-haired attorney placed a fresh contract in front of Roman. Security closed the doors. Roman sat for the first time. Start again. Claire lifted the headset. The opening sentence came in English. Our position remains consistent. Vale Atlantic Freight will receive guaranteed access to the Eastern Port Network provided that the exclusivity period remains limited to the initial term. The sentence reached Claire through the headset in measured fragments. She separated the legal structure from the speaker's performance. Then she translated. Her voice came out steady. That surprised her more than anyone else. The damp fabric still clung to her side. Her heart still beat too quickly beneath her ribs. Every man in the room still knew she had arrived late and visibly shaken. None of it entered her voice. The silver-haired man was Grant Mercer. He spoke with polished patience as though every demand he made had been designed for the benefit of the person forced to accept it. Across the table, a representative from Veracruz responded in Spanish. The proposed limitation makes the guarantee commercially meaningless. Claire carried the sentence back into English. No hesitation, no apology. The conversation moved forward. For the first several minutes, she focused on survival. Listen, understand, hold, translate, release. The process had always felt physical to her. Words entered through one side of her mind and passed through a narrow internal chamber where meaning separated from sound. Then they emerged in another language before the next sentence arrived. There was no space for embarrassment inside that chamber, no space for Roman Vale, no space for the fact that he had cleared an entire room after looking at her. There was only language. Grant spoke. The attorneys responded. A shipping executive interrupted. The dark-haired lawyer corrected a date. Claire followed each voice and matched each register. Formal Spanish for the corporate representatives. Precise English for the attorneys. Careful neutrality whenever Grant attempted to soften a demand through tone. Within 15 minutes, the room forgot she was wet. Within 25, they stopped looking at the clock. Within 40, they began waiting for her. That was how Claire knew she had taken control of her part of the room. No one praised her. No one needed to. They simply stopped questioning the space between a sentence and its translation. Roman spoke rarely. When he did, the room changed shape. At first, Claire assumed his silence was strategic in the ordinary sense. Powerful negotiators often allowed attorneys to fill the room before entering with the final position. Roman's silence was different. He was not waiting to join the conversation. He was deciding whether the conversation deserved to continue. Grant proposed changing the northern port access window. The attorney beside him gave 3 reasons. One of the representatives from Veracruz added a clarification. The discussion circled itself for nearly 4 minutes. Roman listened without looking impatient. Then he placed 2 fingers against the contract. Northern access remains untouched. Claire translated the sentence. The Spanish words felt heavier than their length. A representative began to answer. Roman looked at him. The man stopped. Claire understood. Roman did not make counter-proposals when he believed a condition had already been settled. He did not use extra words to make other men feel included in decisions he considered finished. She adjusted quickly. When Roman paused, she preserved the pause. When he emphasized a single word, she gave its Spanish equivalent the same weight. When he allowed silence to follow a statement, she did not rush to fill it. At 9:52, Roman said, "The liability remains with the operator." Claire translated. She felt his eyes on her before she looked up. It was not suspicion. It was recognition. She had carried more than his vocabulary. She had carried his intent. The moment passed without expression. Grant resumed speaking, and the room closed over it. The documents concerned a distribution agreement between Vale Atlantic Freight and a shipping consortium with operations in Texas, Mexico, and the eastern United States. On the surface, the arrangement was simple. Vale Atlantic would provide rail yards, warehouses, inland trucking routes, and access to port facilities along the Delaware River. The consortium would provide cargo priority coastal capacity and guaranteed shipping windows. Beneath that structure, every clause concealed a fight. Who absorbed losses during customs delays? Who controlled emergency routing? Who could suspend service? Which party paid for damaged cargo? Which language version governed if the documents conflicted? That final issue mattered more than the room wanted to admit. The English draft favored Vale Atlantic in several places. The Spanish draft favored the consortium in others. Most differences could be explained as style. One could not. Grant turned to a clause concerning terminal access. We are prepared to accept the revised exclusivity period, provided that access remains commercially reasonable throughout the initial term. Claire listened. Her eyes moved to the Spanish draft. The phrase was not equivalent. Commercially reasonable had been translated as commercially viable under prevailing market conditions. The difference looked small. It was not. The English version imposed a standard of conduct. Vale Atlantic would have to behave reasonably. The Spanish version created a condition. Access would continue only while someone believed the arrangement remained financially viable. Market conditions could change. Definitions could change with them. The consortium could reduce access and later claim economic necessity. Claire stopped before translating. The silence lasted less than 2 seconds. In that room, 2 seconds was an announcement. Grant looked at her. "Is there a problem?" Claire kept one finger on the line. For accuracy, the English statement and the Spanish draft do not create the same obligation. The attorney beside Grant leaned forward. In what respect the English language requires commercially reasonable access? The Spanish text allows access to depend on prevailing market conditions. Grant folded his hands. That distinction may be narrower than you suggest. Claire looked at him. One describes how a party must behave. The other allows the obligation to disappear when financial conditions change. Grant's smile remained pleasant. "Are you offering legal interpretation, Miss Bennett?" "No." Her voice stayed level. "I am identifying a linguistic difference before translating it as though no difference exists." A chair shifted near Roman. The dark-haired attorney reached for the Spanish draft. He read the clause, then compared it with the English. His eyes moved to Roman. "She is correct." Grant glanced at him. The attorney continued. "The distinction is material. Across the table, the representatives from Veracruz began speaking rapidly in Spanish. They insisted that outside counsel had prepared the wording and that no strategic intent had been attached to the phrase. Claire translated every word. Roman did not look at them. He looked at Grant. "Correct the draft." Grant's expression remained controlled. "The language can be clarified. Correct it." For several seconds, no one moved. A man protecting his pride might have argued. Grant protected leverage instead. He nodded to his attorney. The clause was marked for revision. The meeting continued. Claire lowered her eyes to her notes. She could feel Grant watching her. She had changed in his mind. She was no longer a contractor who had entered late. She was an obstacle. At 10:38, Roman called a recess. The room loosened immediately. Attorneys reached for their phones. Assistants opened laptops. A security guard entered with coffee and water. Claire removed the headset. A dull ache had formed behind her ears. She pressed 2 fingers against her temple and reviewed the notes she had made during this session. Someone placed a glass of water near her hand. Claire looked up. Roman stood beside the station. I could have reached it. The pitcher was 6 feet away. I have arms. So I noticed. His answer was quiet enough that no one else heard it. Claire looked at him. His expression remained composed, but something had changed since their private conversation. The threat inside his stillness had not disappeared. It had become less impersonal. You found the clause quickly, he said. It was different. Everyone at this table read both versions. Most people read for what they expect to find, and you listen for what someone hopes you miss. Claire lifted the glass. You remembered. I remember useful things. She took a drink. Across the room, Grant watched her. Roman followed her gaze. He is interested in you now. That sounds less flattering when you say it. It was not intended to flatter. Claire set down the glass. What does he want? Roman looked at Grant. He has not decided. You said the same thing about yourself. Roman's eyes returned to her. That concerned you. It still does. A faint trace of amusement appeared. Before he could answer, the dark-haired attorney approached. Roman. A word. Roman did not move immediately. Claire looked between them. The attorney waited. Roman turned back to Claire. Daniel Shaw, my chief legal counsel. Daniel gave Claire a restrained nod. His expression made it clear that introductions were not the reason he had approached. Roman looked at Claire's untouched glass. Drink. Claire raised one eyebrow. That sounded like an order. It was medical advice from a freight executive. An unexpected qualification. I do not want the interpreter collapsing before the liability section. The interpreter. The words were ordinary. The tone was not. Roman walked away with Daniel. Claire lifted the glass again. Grant began crossing the room. He carried no coffee and no documents. He stopped at the edge of the interpreter's station, leaving the careful distance of a man who understood how to appear harmless. You are very good, he said. Thank you. I have worked with interpreters who would not have caught that distinction. Then they were not reading both versions. Some believe their responsibility begins and ends with spoken language. Mine begins with accuracy. Grant looked down at her notes. Her handwriting was small and structured. Terms were grouped by subject. Question marks marked ambiguous phrases. Lines connected repeated concepts across separate clauses. How long have you worked with Roman Vale? I have not. Grant's eyes lifted. I was contracted yesterday by Keystone. Not yet, then. Claire closed her notebook. Not yet. What his smile grew warmer without becoming kind. Not yet a permanent part of his team. I have no reason to become one. People often discover reasons. Is there a question behind this conversation? Professional curiosity. Professional curiosity usually has a purpose. For the first time, the pleasant surface of Grant's expression thinned. Only slightly. You read rooms well. I have to. Then you understand that being noticed in certain rooms can be useful. Claire held his gaze. It can also be expensive. Grant's eyes sharpened. Claire did not look away. She could not tell whether her answer had warned him or invited another test. I look forward to the afternoon session, Miss Bennett. So do I. Grant stepped away. Claire released the breath she had been holding. Roman appeared beside her a moment later. She had not seen him cross the room. What did he want to know whether I belong to you? Roman's face became unreadable. What did you tell him that I do not? Roman nodded once. Good. The approval irritated her. You agree, yes. Why? Because you do not belong to anyone. The answer stopped her. Roman looked toward Grant, who was speaking with one of his attorneys. Especially not a man who asks questions before deciding what he wants from the answers. Claire followed his gaze. You think he was testing me? He tests everything. What did he learn? That you are observant? He already knew that. He learned you are willing to say what you observe. The recess ended before Claire could answer. everyone returned to the table. She placed the headset over her ears. The next section concerned customs inspections and cargo losses. It required nearly an hour of continuous interpretation. By the end of it, Claire's throat felt dry. Her mind did not. She had found the rhythm of the room. Daniel spoke in complete legal structures. Grant's attorney buried conditions near the ends of sentences. The representatives from Veracruz interrupted most often when they felt cornered. Grant used courtesy when preparing to demand something. Roman became quieter when he was angry. At 11:46, Grant proposed shifting inspection liability to Vale Atlantic. Roman let him speak for nearly 3 minutes. Then he said no. Claire translated the single word. Grant smiled. Perhaps you would consider proportional allocation. No. Based on operational control. No. Claire delivered the third translation with the same calm weight as the first. One of the representatives glanced between her and Roman. It was a strange form of intimacy. Claire knew the exact shape of Roman's refusal. He trusted her not to soften it. At noon, Roman closed the document. We continue at 2. The opposing team gathered their materials. The room emptied in stages. Claire removed the headset and rubbed the back of her neck. Her coat still hung over the chair, damp and useless. She opened her bag and found the protein bar she had packed that morning. Lunch is being brought up. Roman's voice came from the head of the table. Claire looked over. He had remained behind. Daniel had left with the others. Ethan stood near the door, speaking quietly into his earpiece. Claire held up the protein bar. I came prepared. That is not lunch. It contains almonds. Roman walked toward her. The food will be here in 5 minutes. Claire waited. He seemed to realize something. You can stay. Was that a request it was intended to be? It needs work. Roman stopped beside the chair across from her. Would you stay? That was better. Is that a yes? Claire placed the protein bar back into her bag. Yes. Roman gave Ethan a small nod. The security chief left and closed the doors. Lunch arrived on a silver cart pushed by a hotel employee who looked at no one for longer than a second. Soup, roasted chicken, bread, a salad with pears and walnuts, coffee, nothing extravagant, nothing careless. Roman divided the food between 2 places without ceremony. They sat near the windows. Not at opposite ends of the table. Not close enough to suggest familiarity. Rain moved across the river in dark bands. For a while, they ate in silence. Roman did not ask empty questions. He did not inquire about the weather or her commute. His silence did not feel awkward. It felt selected. Claire broke it first. Does everyone leave when you tell them to? Yes. You say that as if it has always been true. It has not. What changed? Roman tore a piece of bread. I became someone they believed. The answer carried no pride, only fact, believed about what that refusing me has consequences. Claire studied him. You make that sound almost reasonable. It is reasonable to the people who understand the arrangement. And the people who do not, they learn. His voice remained calm. That made the sentence more disturbing. Claire should have wanted distance. Instead, she found herself studying him. The rolled sleeves, the dark ink on his forearms, the restraint in every movement. He had the body of a man capable of violence and the discipline of someone who rarely needed to demonstrate it. You recognized my name this morning, Roman said. Yes, and stayed. I had already survived the train system and a driver with a personal commitment to flood damage. Roman looked at her. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then he smiled. It changed his face more than Claire expected. The severity remained, but it no longer seemed carved into him. What did you hear about me, that people lower their voices when they say your name? Anything else that Vale Atlantic freight is legitimate? It is. On paper. The smile disappeared. Not from offense. And away from paper, Claire took a drink of water. I was hired to translate words, not rumors. You hear more than words. That does not mean I repeat everything I hear. Why not? Discretion is part of competence. Some people call it loyalty. I reserve loyalty for people. Discretion belongs to the work. Roman considered that. You make careful distinctions. I translate for a living. That is your answer for everything. It is a useful profession. He looked at her for a long moment. Why did you stay at the station? When I cleared the room, you ordered everyone at the table to leave. You were in the room. I was beside the table. That is a careful distinction. It is the accurate one. And if I had meant everyone in the room, you would have said everyone in the room. Roman's eyes narrowed slightly. Most people would not test that difference. I was not testing you. What were you doing, my job? He looked toward the interpreter's station. You believed your job required you to remain alone with a man whose name you had heard in lowered voices. My job required me not to abandon my station until I was dismissed. That sounds like pride. It is. The honesty seemed to please him. Pride creates problems. So does the lack of it. Rain struck the glass. Far below, traffic moved along the river like dark blood through narrow veins. Roman lifted his coffee. What else does the job require? Accuracy, neutrality, memory, restraint. Restraint. An interpreter hears things that are not meant for her personally. Anger, threats, confessions, sometimes insults, and you do nothing. I translate them. That is doing something. Not for myself. Roman's gaze sharpened. Does that become difficult? Yes, when someone assumes neutrality means I have no judgment. And do you? About what? Me. The question entered the space between them without warning. Claire looked at his hands. One rested around the coffee cup, the other lay flat against the table. No rings. A faint scar crossed one knuckle. You are used to controlling outcomes. That is observation. You do not waste words. Also observation. You frighten people on purpose. His eyes stayed on hers. Sometimes, you do not enjoy being misunderstood, but you allow it when fear is useful. A quieter stillness entered his face. And what does that make me? I have known you for 4 hours. You understood Grant Mercer in less than 1. Grant wants something, so do I. The directness tightened something beneath Claire's ribs. What Roman did not look away. I have not decided. The answer should have sounded calculated. Instead, it sounded honest. Claire looked toward the river. Roman broke the silence. What is your judgment of yourself? That is not a normal lunch question. I do not have many normal lunches. I find that easy to believe. He waited. Claire folded her napkin once. I think I'm good at what I do. You think I know? Then why did you look like you expected to be thrown out this morning? The question found the place Claire had kept hidden since entering the tower. She could have dismissed it. She could have said that lateness was unprofessional and left the answer there. Instead, she looked at the water stain on her dress. Because competence does not protect you before people see it. Roman said nothing. Claire continued. You can spend years building a reputation and still lose the room in the first 10 seconds. The wrong clothes, the wrong age, the wrong voice, the wrong entrance. You believed the room had decided. Yes, and you walked in anyway. What else was I supposed to do? Most people leave before rejection becomes official. The words carried an old familiarity. Claire looked at him. Is that what you would have done? No? Then why ask? Because I wanted to hear why you did not. Her pulse shifted. The room felt smaller, not because Roman moved closer. He did not. Because his attention had become complete. Claire had spent years in rooms where powerful men looked through her around her, or only at the service she provided. Roman looked at her as if the answer mattered beyond the conversation. I refuse to help the room underestimate me. Something changed in his expression. Recognition, not of her words, of the instinct beneath them. The doors opened. Daniel entered with a folder beneath one arm. He stopped when he saw them sitting together. His gaze moved to the 2 plates, then to Roman. The revised draft is ready. Roman stood. Lunch ended without another word. The afternoon session began at 2. The rain had softened, leaving silver trails across the windows. Claire returned to the interpreter's station with a full notebook and a sharper awareness of Roman than she wanted. The attorneys began with the corrected access clause. Grant acknowledged the revision without looking at her. That concerned Claire more than another smile would have. For the next hour, the discussion remained technical. No obvious traps. No public challenges. Grant allowed his attorneys to speak while he observed. At 3:11, the parties reached the suspension section. The English version required a documented material breach before either side could suspend service. Claire checked the Spanish draft. The word documented was missing. She read the sentence again. There was no ambiguity. Without that single word, a party could suspend service based on an accusation that had never been recorded or proven. Grant began speaking. In the event of a material breach, either party may temporarily suspend performance while the matter is reviewed. Claire did not translate. The room stopped with her. Grant looked up. Another problem. The Spanish draft removes the documentation requirement. His attorney checked the page. Grant leaned back. The obligation to prove a breach is understood. Understood is not written. You are becoming unusually involved in the drafting process, Miss Bennett. Claire kept her hand on the contract. I am involved in making sure the two versions mean the same thing. Grant turned toward Roman. Your interpreter appears to have expanded her role. Roman's face remained still. She found a missing condition. She has repeatedly interrupted negotiations to favor your interpretation. Claire answered before Roman could. I have not favored anyone. Grant looked at her. You have corrected two provisions that benefit Mr. Vale. Claire turned several pages. Page 37. Grant's attorney frowned. Claire pointed to the English text. The English draft gives Vale Atlantic 3 business days to provide notice of a port closure. The Spanish draft gives the consortium 5 calendar days. The English version is less favorable to your client. She looked at Roman. I marked it during the morning session. Daniel checked the page. Claire continued. If the parties want equivalent obligations, that clause also needs correction. The representatives from Veracruz began reading both versions. One of them spoke quickly in Spanish. Claire translated. He wants the longer notice period preserved in both drafts. Roman nodded. Make it 5 business days. The representative agreed. Grant's expression did not change, but the room had changed around him. Claire had not protected Roman. She had protected consistency. Grant could no longer describe her accuracy as loyalty without exposing his own interest in the errors. Roman looked at Claire. There was no smile, only respect. Grant closed his folder. Then both provisions will be revised. The meeting continued. At 4:37, Roman ended the session. The opposing team gathered their materials and left with controlled efficiency. Grant was the last to reach the door. He paused beside Claire's station. An impressive first day. Claire capped her pen. I prefer accurate. I am sure you do. He walked out. The doors closed. Ethan crossed the room and approached Roman near the windows. He spoke quietly. Claire caught only fragments. Her name. 20 minutes. Mercer's office. Roman's face became completely still. Claire remained beside the interpreter's station. She did not pretend she had heard nothing. Roman looked across the room at her. Ethan followed his gaze. What happened? Claire asked. Ethan waited for Roman. Roman answered. Someone from Grant Mercer's office requested your employment history. The cold that moved through Claire had nothing to do with her damp dress. What else? Your professional references. Your client list. Every executive assignment Keystone will disclose. Claire closed her portfolio. Why Roman looked toward the door Grant had used. Because he stopped seeing you as an interpreter. Claire held his gaze. What does he see? Roman's voice became quieter. Leverage. The word remained in the room after Roman spoke it. Claire looked at the closed conference room doors as though Grant Mercer might still be standing on the other side with one hand resting on the handle. 20 minutes earlier, he had been smiling. Now his office was collecting the pieces of her life, her employment history, her clients, the names of people who trusted her. A reputation built through 8 years of early train sleepless preparation and sentences translated with enough precision that no one remembered how much could have gone wrong. Grant had not raised his voice. He had not threatened her. He had simply begun measuring what could be damaged. Claire turned toward Ethan. What did they say they wanted it for standard professional review? There is nothing standard about requesting an interpreter's client history after a negotiation begins. Ethan's expression did not change. No. Did Keystone release anything? Not yet. Roman stood beside the windows. The river beyond him reflected the last gray light of the afternoon. Ethan. The security chief looked at him. Find out who made the request and what they intend to do with it. Claire looked at Roman, how his eyes moved to hers. That is not something you need to worry about. The answer came too easily. It carried the calm certainty of a man accustomed to deciding where other people's knowledge should end. Claire closed the portfolio. That is usually the sentence people use before doing something they know I would object to. Roman's gaze sharpened. I said you do not need to worry. That is not the same as saying there is nothing to worry about. Ethan looked between them. Roman dismissed him with a small movement of his head. The security chief left. The door shut. Claire slid her notebook into the portfolio and fastened the clasp. "I'm going home. There is a car waiting downstairs. I can arrange my own ride." "I know." "Then why are you telling me what to do?" "I am not." Roman walked toward her. He stopped with enough space between them for Claire to move around him. "There is a car at the south entrance. You can use it or ignore it. The driver does not know where you live. No one will enter your building. No one will ask where you go after that." Claire studied his face. He was making an effort. The restraint was visible only because she had spent the entire day learning how naturally control belonged to him. "You practiced that sentence." "No." "You adjusted it before saying it." "Yes." Why Roman looked at the damp coat hanging from the chair. "Because you are already angry." "I am not angry about the car. You are angry about being managed." Claire lifted the coat. "Those are often the same thing. For me, they cannot be." The answer stopped her. Roman's voice had softened, but there was no apology inside it, only recognition that a line existed and that he was trying not to cross it. Claire slipped one arm into the cold sleeve. "At least let the car take you somewhere warm," he said. "I will decide in the elevator. That is all I am asking." Claire moved toward the doors. Her hand reached the control. "Roman." He looked at her. "If Grant is trying to use me against you, what happens when he realizes it does not work?" Roman's expression remained still. "He may try to use me against you." Claire felt the answer settle beneath her ribs. She opened the door and left. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ascent. Claire stood alone inside the mirrored car, holding the portfolio against her side. Her reflection looked more controlled now. The loose strands of hair had dried into waves around her face. The water stain on her dress had faded into an uneven shadow. Her posture was straight. Only her eyes revealed that something had changed. That morning she had entered the building afraid of being dismissed. Now she was leaving, afraid of being considered valuable by men who understood value only in terms of pressure. The elevator reached the lobby. Through the glass doors, Claire saw a black sedan waiting beneath the awning. A driver stood beside the rear door. He did not wave. He did not approach. He waited. Claire could order another cab. She could walk to the train. She could refuse Roman's help and pretend the day had ended when the meeting did. Her phone vibrated. A message from Keystone appeared. Tomorrow's session confirmed for 9 in the morning. Claire looked through the glass at the waiting car. Then she walked toward it. The driver opened the door. "Miss Bennett, do you know where I live?" "No." The answer surprised her. "Mr. Vale did not give you an address. He said you would give me a destination if you chose to ride." Claire got inside. She gave him the intersection nearest her apartment rather than the building number. He entered it without comment. The sedan moved into evening traffic. Philadelphia passed beyond the tinted windows in wet reflections of red and white. Office lights glowed through the rain. Pedestrians crowded beneath awnings. The elevated train moved above Market Street, its windows bright against the dark steel. Claire leaned her head against the seat. The car meant nothing. Transportation. A practical response to a professional risk. She repeated the explanation until the driver stopped 2 blocks from her apartment. Claire thanked him and stepped out. The rain had softened to a mist. Her building stood on a narrow street near the elevated tracks. The brick exterior had darkened from the storm. A corner grocery glowed beneath a green awning. Somewhere nearby, someone was frying onions. Claire entered through the front door and climbed to the 7th floor. Her apartment was small, quiet, and exactly as expensive as she could manage without debt. The living room held a gray sofa, 2 bookshelves, a narrow dining table that served as a desk, and tall windows facing the tracks. Claire had chosen the apartment because it looked toward the city instead of another building. At night, the movement beyond the glass made the space feel less lonely. She locked the door behind her. The silence pressed against her ears after hours of voices. Claire removed the wet dress. She took a hot shower. She made tea and forgot to drink it. At the dining table, she opened the notebook and replayed the negotiation line by line. She checked every translation against the contract. She reviewed the terminology. She searched for any moment when irritation might have entered her tone. She found none. The work was clean. The corrections had been necessary. Grant's interest in her was not a response to failure. It was a response to competence. That should have comforted her. It did not. At 10:52, Claire opened Keystone's website and reviewed her public profile. Her listed specialties included corporate law logistics, pharmaceutical acquisitions, and labor arbitration. Client names were protected, but enough details remained for a determined person to identify some of them. A municipal transportation dispute, a hospital merger, 2 federal arbitration matters, a pharmaceutical acquisition involving a Spanish-speaking board. Claire could see how the pieces might be connected by someone with enough time and influence. At 11:19, she searched Grant Mercer. The results were polished: conference photographs, professional awards, articles about ethical negotiation, a profile describing him as one of the most respected commercial strategists on the East Coast. There was nothing about threats, nothing about reputations being used as weapons. Men like Grant did not create damage that appeared in search results. They created uncertainty, a quiet question in the right office, a concern raised without accusation, a client who suddenly chose someone else, a professional review with no visible author. At midnight, Claire closed the laptop. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The train passed outside every 15 minutes, filling the room with a low, metallic tremor. She thought about Grant. Then she thought about Roman. That was worse. She remembered the way he had moved the water closer during the meeting, the way he had said she belonged to no one, the way his expression changed when she told him she refused to help a room underestimate her. She also remembered what people said about him, not the details, the absence of details, a name spoken quietly, a legitimate freight company surrounded by rumors no one wanted to repeat, a man whose security team looked prepared for war. Being disliked by a powerful man was dangerous. Being noticed by one was not safer. At 2:06 in the morning, Claire's phone lit up on the nightstand. She reached for it. A new email had arrived from Rachel. The subject line read, "Neutrality Review." Claire opened it. A concern had been raised regarding her relationship with a principal involved in the Vale Atlantic negotiation. The concern suggested that personal access to the client might compromise her professional neutrality. Claire read the message twice. Her body became completely still. There it was. No accusation, no evidence, no specific relationship, only a concern, the kind of word that could enter a professional file without becoming clear enough to defend against. Claire called Rachel immediately. The call went to voicemail. She did not leave a message. She sat on the edge of the bed with the phone in her hand. Grant had not wasted time. The following morning, Philadelphia looked scrubbed clean and merciless. The rain had stopped before dawn. The streets shone beneath a pale sky. Cold wind moved between the towers with enough force to make pedestrians lean forward as they walked. Claire arrived in Center City at 8:21. She wore a burgundy suit, a cream blouse, and low black heels. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her makeup was minimal. Her portfolio contained printed copies of every email related to the assignment. She stood inside a coffee shop across from Vale Tower and called Rachel. This time the coordinator answered. "Claire." "What concern?" Rachel exhaled. "I was going to explain. Explain now. Someone representing one of the parties contacted compliance last night. Which party? They did not identify the individual. They identified me. Yes. What exactly did they say that your relationship with a principal in the negotiation may compromise neutrality?" Claire stared through the window at the dark glass tower across the street. "I met Roman Vale yesterday morning. I believe you." "Then close the review." "It is not that simple." "Why? Because belief and liability are different." The phrase struck Claire with the polished emptiness of corporate language. What evidence did they provide? None. What relationship did they claim exists? They did not make a direct claim. Then there is no complaint. There is a concern. Claire closed her eyes. The distinction was deliberate. A complaint required facts. A concern required only fear. "What happens to my assignments?" "You will finish the Vale negotiation, and after that, there may be a review before we assign you to future executive work." The coffee shop seemed to recede around her. 8 years, hundreds of hours of preparation, flights taken with no sleep, contracts interpreted at midnight, clients who trusted her with conversations that could move companies and careers. All of it had become subject to review because Grant Mercer had placed one careful question in the right office. When was the concern submitted? Yesterday at 5:08. Less than an hour after the meeting ended. Send me the record. I cannot disclose the source. I asked for the record of the allegation against me. There is no formal allegation. Then why is my work under review? Rachel said nothing. Claire's voice became quieter. Send me everything you are legally permitted to send. I will ask compliance. No. Ask them to preserve everything. Emails, call records, internal notes, the exact time the concern was received. Every person who saw it. Claire, do that. Rachel hesitated. All right. Claire ended the call. Her coffee sat untouched on the counter. She picked it up, carried it to the trash, and threw it away. At 8:47, she entered Vale Tower. The same guard sat behind the security desk. He looked at her identification, then at the time. Early today. Claire met his eyes. I can count in both languages. The guard almost smiled. The elevator carried her to the 61st floor. When the doors opened, Ethan stood in the hallway. His gaze moved over her face. You received something? It was not a question. Claire stepped out. How do you know Mr. Mercer's office contacted Keystone? You are monitoring my employer. We are monitoring Grant. That does not answer the question. Ethan stepped aside. No, we are not monitoring your employer. Claire walked past him. Good. The conference room doors stood open. No one else had arrived. Roman was inside near the windows speaking with Daniel. He turned when Claire entered. His eyes moved to the portfolio in her hand, then to her face. You are early. 12 minutes. The reference passed between them. Roman dismissed Daniel with a look. The attorney left, though his expression made it clear he objected to the exclusion. Roman approached Claire. What happened? She placed the printed email on the table. He read it. No visible anger crossed his face. Instead, the stillness inside him became complete. Your assignments are affected. Keystone will let me finish this one. After that, my executive work may be suspended pending review. Based on what evidence? None. Roman placed the paper down carefully. It will be corrected. Claire looked at him. By whom, me? No. The word left her immediately. Roman's eyes lifted. No, I will not have you call my employer. I was not planning to call. That is not reassuring. He moved closer. Claire, I mean it. So do I. The room remained silent. Claire lowered her voice. This is my profession, my name. I decide how I defend it. And while you decide, Grant continues. Then give me information. Do not take control. Roman studied her. The request was unfamiliar to him, not permission to protect her. A boundary around how he could help. Ethan is working on the source, he said. Then let him work. You are angry. Yes, good. That is a strange response. Fear makes people retreat. Anger makes them precise. Claire picked up the paper. I can be both. I know. His voice softened. That is what concerned me yesterday. Before Claire could respond, the first members of Grant's team entered. The conversation ended. The morning session began at 9. Grant arrived 6 minutes late. He entered with an apology addressed to the room and a smile directed at Claire. She returned neither. For the first hour, the negotiation remained technical, revisions to 2 subsidiary clauses, a dispute over warehouse exclusivity, a prolonged discussion about customs inspections. Claire translated every sentence with exact control. She could feel Roman tracking her during the complex exchanges, not with doubt, with attention. At 10:43, he pushed a glass of water toward her without interrupting Daniel. Claire took it. Grant saw. At 11:02, Roman called a short recess. Claire removed the headset and began arranging her notes. Grant approached. She watched him come. His expression was courteous. His pace unhurried. Miss Bennett, Mr. Mercer, I owe you an apology for yesterday. No, you do not. A flicker crossed his face. I was testing the dynamics of the room. You were testing whether Roman would react if you embarrassed me. Grant smiled. And did he? You were there. He looked down at the documents in front of her. I have been doing some research, I know. That stopped him for half a second. Claire continued. Your office requested my employment history 20 minutes after I corrected the access clause. I often research people who enter sensitive negotiations. Did you research the court reporter, know the assistants, know the employee who delivered lunch? His smile thinned. You are not hotel staff. No. I am the person who found the language your team hoped no one would question. Grant's eyes became colder. You have an excellent reputation. Pharmaceutical acquisitions, municipal contracts, 2 federal arbitration matters. significant clients. Claire kept her hands flat against the table. I work hard for it, I'm sure you do. Grant leaned slightly closer. It would be unfortunate if certain clients began questioning whether your translations remain neutral around powerful men. The threat entered quietly. No raised voice, no direct demand. Only a possibility placed between them. Claire felt cold move through her body. Not panic, recognition. What do you want? Grant watched her face. I want you to understand that attention is not protection. What do you want from me? Nothing yet. The answer was worse than a request. Claire lowered her voice. You filed the concern with Keystone. I have no knowledge of your firm's internal decisions. You knew they contacted me. Grant's expression did not change. You looked tired. Claire held his gaze. You made a mistake. Did I? You assumed threatening my reputation would make me easier to control. His smile returned. I assumed it would make you realistic. What does realism look like to you, knowing when your presence has become more expensive than your absence? The room around them had quieted. Not completely. Daniel spoke near the windows. Ethan stood beside the door. Several attorneys reviewed documents. Yet Claire felt Roman's attention from across the room. Grant followed the direction of her awareness. There it was, the thing he had wanted to confirm. Roman was watching. Grant stepped back. Be careful, Miss Bennett. Men like Roman Vale do not notice people without changing their lives. Claire's voice stayed calm. Men like you do not offer warnings without trying to cause the danger. For the first time, Grant stopped smiling. He returned to his seat. Claire remained at the station. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. She did not look at Roman until the recess ended. When she did, his expression told her he had understood enough. The afternoon session broke early. At 3, Daniel informed the room that Vale Atlantic's legal team required additional time to review the revised suspension language. Grant objected mildly. Roman ended the meeting with one sentence. We continue tomorrow. Chairs moved. Documents disappeared into cases. The opposing team left. Grant did not approach Claire again. When the doors closed, Roman remained at the table. Daniel and Ethan stayed near the entrance. Claire organized her notes slowly. She knew Roman was waiting. Leave us, he said. Daniel looked at him. Roman. Outside. Daniel's jaw tightened. He and Ethan left. The doors closed. Roman approached the interpreter's station. He threatened you. It was not a question. Yes. Tell me exactly what he said. Claire considered how to answer. Not whether to tell him. How to preserve the precise meaning. She repeated the conversation almost word for word. The apology, the investigation, the reference to her clients, the suggestion that Roman's attention was not protection, the warning that her presence had become more expensive than her absence. Roman listened without interruption. When she finished, his face had not changed. The anger was visible only in the absence of movement. He cannot do what he is implying. He already did. The concern can be withdrawn. The concern can be replaced by another concern. I can prevent that. Claire looked at him. How Roman's eyes remained on hers, in ways you do not need to know. She felt the room contract. That is exactly the problem. It is the safest answer. For whom? For you? No. Roman's jaw tightened. You think knowledge protects you. I think ignorance makes me useful to whoever controls the information. I am not trying to use you. Then do not ask me to look away. His voice became quieter. Grant is threatening everything you built. I know. I can remove his ability to continue. By doing what Roman said nothing. Claire stepped away from the station. This is the part no one says aloud about men like you. His expression hardened. Men like me. The protection and the danger are not separate. The words struck him. You offer safety with one hand, but I am not allowed to ask what the other hand is doing. I am trying to keep you outside of this. I was outside of it yesterday morning. Roman looked toward the windows. I know. No, you do not. Claire's voice shook now, but she did not stop. I walked into this building to translate a contract. By midnight, my career was under review. Grant did that because he believes I matter to you. Roman turned back to her. If you respond in some hidden way, then he is right. My life becomes a place where powerful men fight without asking me. What would you have me do? The question was sharper than anything he had said to her. It carried frustration. Not because she was wrong, because she had removed the solution he understood best. Claire met his eyes. I do not want anything done in my name that I could not look at directly if I knew the truth. The silence lasted. Roman's hands remained at his sides. His voice, when it came, was controlled. You are asking me to let him continue. No. I am asking you to find another way. You assume there is always another way. I assume a man with your resources can do better than making someone disappear. His eyes narrowed. I did not say anything about making him disappear. You did not have to. The city stretched beyond the windows, cold and bright beneath the clearing sky. Claire could hear the low mechanical hum of the building. Roman looked at her as if she had placed something heavy in his hands and refused to take it back. Finally, he walked to the table. He opened a folder and removed a legal memorandum. Grant's client concealed liability exposure in the regional distribution clause. Claire stayed where she was. How serious? Serious enough that they cannot afford a formal review. You knew this. My legal team confirmed it yesterday. What were you going to do with it? Use it tomorrow evening if the negotiation stalled. Roman placed the memorandum on the table between them. If I use it now, Grant will need the agreement to close cleanly. He will not risk an investigation into the drafts, his client's disclosures, or the origin of the concern against you. Claire looked down at the pages. This is legal, yes. Documented, yes. Obtained through counsel, yes. No one is threatened. Roman held her gaze. Only with consequences they created themselves. Claire looked up. You were going to use this anyway, tomorrow. And now, because of me. Roman did not soften the answer. Yes. Something moved through Claire's chest. Not gratitude, not relief, recognition. He had listened. He had not agreed easily. He had not become harmless. He had taken the boundary she gave him and found a way to remain inside it. Roman pushed the memorandum closer. You can read it. Claire opened the folder. The language was dense but clear enough. Undisclosed exposure, conflicting representations, falsified inspection records, potential regulatory review, contractual liability. Nothing hidden. Nothing she would have to pretend not to understand. When she finished, she closed the folder. This could stop him. It will. And if it does not? Roman looked at her for a long moment. Then we have another conversation. That sounds like a threat. It is a promise to ask before I act. Claire held his gaze. For a man like you, that may be more difficult. It is. The conference room doors opened. Daniel stepped inside. The revised documents are ready. His eyes moved to the memorandum between them. You are using it now. Yes. Daniel's expression tightened. That changes tomorrow's strategy. Roman did not look away from Claire. Then change it. Daniel remained still for a moment. Then he nodded. Claire placed one hand on the folder. I am not leaving the negotiation. Daniel looked at her. That may be the cleanest option. No. If Grant's allegation concerns neutrality, replacing you removes the issue. It rewards the issue. This is not about fairness. It is exactly about fairness. Claire turned toward Roman. If I leave, everyone in that room will assume there was truth behind the concern. My absence becomes his evidence. Daniel closed the door behind him. And if you stay, Grant may challenge you publicly. Then I answer publicly. You are an interpreter, not a party to the agreement. I became part of the conflict when he used my name. Daniel looked at Roman. Do not let anger make this decision. Roman's gaze remained on Claire. What do you propose Claire thought of the email? The call with Rachel, the timing of Grant's investigation, the first altered clause. I stay at the station. I perform my work. If he raises the concern, I respond with facts. What facts? Daniel asked. The assignment record, the timing of his request for my history, the concern submitted after I corrected his language. You do not have the source record. Not yet. Roman looked at Daniel. Get it. Daniel exhaled slowly. There are legal limits. Stay inside them. The instruction carried the same weight as every command Roman had given since Claire entered the tower. Daniel nodded. Claire closed her portfolio. Roman's eyes returned to her. If you remain in that room, I cannot control how Grant responds. I am not asking you to control the room for me. The words settled between them. Roman accepted them with a single nod. Then tomorrow you keep your seat. The sentence followed Claire long after she left the tower. It followed her into the elevator. through the marble lobby, into the black sedan waiting beneath the awning. It remained in the quiet of her apartment while she spread printed emails across the dining table and read the same timestamps until the numbers blurred. Keep your seat. It sounded simple. It was not. A seat in a room like Roman's was never only a chair. It was permission to speak, a position from which other people decided whether your voice carried weight. Grant had tried to remove Claire without ordering her to leave. He had planted suspicion and expected the room to do the rest. By midnight, Keystone had sent 3 documents: the assignment confirmation, the scheduling log, the internal notice showing the exact time the neutrality concern entered the system. The source remained hidden. Rachel included a short message. This is everything compliance will release without a formal request. Claire printed every page. At 12:41, another email arrived. This one came from Daniel Shaw. There was no greeting. 2 records were attached. The first documented a request from Grant Mercer's office for Claire's professional history. The second confirmed that the request had been made 23 minutes after she identified the discrepancy in the access clause. Daniel's message contained one sentence: use only if necessary. Claire stared at the words. It was not generosity. Daniel still considered her a risk. But he had given her the evidence because Roman had ordered him to stay within the law, and because Claire had made it clear she would not enter the room defenseless. She placed the new records beside the others. The timeline formed itself. Grant had shown no concern about her neutrality when she arrived. He had raised no objection when she began interpreting. He had not questioned her role until she exposed language that benefited his client. Then he investigated her. Then the concern appeared. It was not proof of everything. It did not need to be. It proved motive. At 1 in the morning, Claire stood beside the window and watched a train pass through the dark. Its windows moved across the glass like a chain of pale squares. Somewhere in the city, Roman's attorneys were preparing pressure that could force Grant to retreat. Somewhere, men who answered to Roman were waiting to learn whether legal leverage would be enough. Claire had asked him to find another way. He had agreed. She did not know what that agreement cost a man like him. That uncertainty frightened her almost as much as Grant did. On the table behind her, the documents waited in 3 precise stacks: assignment, investigation, concern. Claire turned from the window. She sat down. Then she began preparing to defend her name. By 7:10 the next morning, Claire had read every document enough times to know the timestamps without looking. She dressed in the burgundy suit she reserved for arbitration hearings. The jacket fit cleanly across her shoulders. Her cream blouse was pressed. Her hair was pinned tightly at the back of her head. Nothing about her appearance asked for sympathy. On the dining table, she arranged the evidence into 3 stacks. The first contained her assignment confirmation and Keystone scheduling records. The second contained the request from Grant Mercer's office for her professional history. The third contained the neutrality concern submitted less than an hour after the meeting ended. Claire placed each stack inside a separate folder. Then she added a copy of the contract clauses she had corrected. She did not know whether Grant would challenge her in front of the room. She knew only that men like him preferred accusations that forced other people to defend themselves without preparation. This time, she would be prepared. At 8:34, Claire entered Vale Tower. The sky above Philadelphia was clear for the first time all week. Sunlight struck the surrounding buildings and scattered across the river in white flashes. Ethan waited outside the elevator on the 61st floor. He held a paper cup. Claire stepped out. "What is that coffee? I can see that. Mr. Vale said you did not eat breakfast yesterday." Claire looked at him. "How would he know you left the protein bar in your bag? Does he notice everything?" Ethan glanced toward the conference room. "No, only what matters to him." Claire took the coffee. The answer followed her down the hallway. Roman stood alone near the windows when she entered the conference room. He wore a dark charcoal suit and a black tie. His sleeves were buttoned today, covering the ink on his forearms. The formality made him look less approachable. It did not make him less dangerous. His eyes moved to the folders in Claire's hands. "You brought copies. I assumed I should not rely on anyone else to remember the facts correctly. Daniel sent you the records." "Yes. Are they enough?" Claire placed the folders at the interpreter's station. "Enough to make Grant explain the timing. Explaining is not the same as losing." "No." Roman walked toward her. That is why the liability memorandum matters. Claire looked at him. And if he does not retreat, we stay with what we agreed. You ask before you act. I remember. The room seemed to narrow around the words. Claire lowered her voice. I do not want a promise made because you think it will calm me. Roman stopped beside the station. I do not make promises casually. Men with power often believe intention is the same as restraint. I know the difference. How his gaze held hers. Because restraint hurts more. Claire studied his face. There was no humor in the answer, no performance, only a truth he would not have offered anyone else in the room. The doors opened. Daniel entered with 2 attorneys behind him. The private moment disappeared. Within minutes, the room filled. Grant arrived at exactly 9. No apology today. He crossed to his seat carrying a leather folder beneath one arm. His eyes moved first to Roman, then to Claire. She was already seated, headset in place, documents arranged in precise stacks. Something tightened in his expression. He had expected an empty chair. Claire met his eyes. Then she looked down at the contract. Daniel began with the revised liability section. For the first hour, no one mentioned the neutrality concern. The negotiation moved through customs procedures, cargo priority, warehouse access, and emergency routing. Claire translated with the same control she had maintained from the beginning. She did not rush. She did not overperform. She refused to let Grant change the sound of her voice. At 10:17, the representatives from Veracruz requested a brief consultation. Roman granted 10 minutes. The foreign attorneys moved into an adjoining room. Grant remained at the table. He reviewed a document without looking at Claire. Roman spoke quietly with Daniel near the windows. Ethan stood outside the closed doors. The silence felt arranged. Grant closed his folder. You seem composed today, Miss Bennett. Claire removed one side of the headset. I am working. Some people find professional scrutiny distracting. Some people mistake scrutiny for evidence. Grant looked at her. You believe the distinction matters. I believe distinctions are the reason contracts exist. His expression remained pleasant. You may discover that reputations operate differently. Reputations are built from patterns and destroyed by perception. Claire rested one hand beside the first folder. Perception is useful when facts are absent. Grant's smile thinned. Before he could answer, the adjoining doors opened. The representatives returned. The session resumed. At 10:46, Grant introduced a revised suspension clause. His attorney read the English language first. In the event of a documented material breach, either party may temporarily suspend performance pending formal review. Claire listened. Then she looked at the Spanish version. The word documented was missing again, not translated differently. Missing. She read the line a second time. The Spanish clause allowed suspension after an alleged material breach. An allegation could be made without evidence. A service route could be closed before any formal review began. Claire did not translate. Grant looked up. Is something unclear? The documentation requirement is missing from the Spanish draft. His attorney checked the page. It is implied by the review process. Then it should be written. Grant leaned back. We addressed this yesterday. We corrected it yesterday. The meaning remains commercially consistent. No. The English version requires evidence before suspension. The Spanish version allows suspension based on an accusation. One of the representatives from Veracruz looked toward Grant. Grant turned his attention to Roman. Perhaps this is the proper moment to address a broader concern. The room became quiet. Claire felt her heartbeat against the headset. Grant folded his hands. Questions have been raised regarding Miss Bennett's professional neutrality. No one moved. Grant continued. Her unusual access to Mr. Vale and the personal attention she has received may create the appearance of a conflict. Claire looked toward Roman. He sat at the head of the table, one hand resting beside the contract. His expression revealed nothing. He did not interrupt. He did not answer for her. He was keeping his promise. Grant looked directly at Claire. For the protection of every party involved, it may be appropriate to replace the interpreter until the matter is reviewed. The words settled across the table. Claire removed the headset. Her fingers were steady. She stood. May I respond? The senior representative from Veracruz nodded. Claire did not look at Roman again. She opened the first folder. I was assigned by Keystone Language Partners at 4:15 on Monday afternoon. She placed the assignment confirmation on the table. I had never met Roman Vale. I had never worked for Vale Atlantic Freight. I had no private contact with anyone involved in this agreement. Grant started to speak. Claire continued before he could. Mr. Mercer raised no concern when I arrived. He raised no concern when I interpreted the opening session. He raised no concern when I translated provisions favorable to his client. She opened the second folder. 23 minutes after I identified a material difference in the port access clause, his office requested my employment history, professional references, and client record. She placed the request beside the assignment confirmation. A murmur moved along the table. Grant's expression remained controlled. Research is standard in sensitive negotiations. Claire looked at him. Did your office research the court report or the assistants know the staff who delivered lunch? That is irrelevant. It establishes selectivity. Grant leaned back. You were not selected because you are an interpreter. No. I was selected because I found language your team hoped no one would question. The warmth left his face. Claire opened the third folder. 46 minutes after the meeting ended, Keystone received a concern, suggesting that my relationship with a principal might compromise my neutrality. She placed the notice beside the other records. The concern did not identify a relationship. It provided no evidence. It was submitted only after my work became inconvenient. Grant glanced toward the representatives from Veracruz. Timing does not prove motive. No. Claire kept her voice calm, but patterns explain intent. Grant's attorney shifted in his seat. Grant looked at Roman. Surely you understand why outside observers might question the attention given to Miss Bennett? Roman said nothing. Grant turned back to Claire. You have received private transportation meals, access to confidential discussions, and personal protection. Claire held his gaze. I received transportation after your office began investigating me. You had lunch alone with Mr. Vale. During a scheduled recess in the building where I was working. Did you discuss matters beyond the contract? Yes. The room tightened. Grant smiled slightly. Claire continued. He asked why I remained at my station after he cleared the room. And your answer, that I had not been dismissed. Grant looked toward the others. You see the problem. No, Claire said. You see an opportunity. His smile vanished. Claire turned toward the table. My relationship with Roman Vale did not exist when I was assigned. It did not exist when I entered this room. The only relationship relevant to my work is my obligation to make certain every person here hears the same agreement. Grant's attorney opened the Spanish contract. Miss Bennett has repeatedly interrupted negotiations in ways that benefited Vale Atlantic. Claire turned several pages. Page 37. The attorney hesitated. Claire pointed to the notice provision. The English draft gave Vale Atlantic 3 business days to report a port closure. The Spanish draft gave the consortium 5 calendar days. I identified that difference yesterday. Daniel placed a corrected copy on the table. She did. Claire looked toward the Veracruz representatives. The final language gives both parties 5 business days. That correction favored the consortium. The senior representative read the clause. Then he looked at Grant. Why was this not mentioned when her neutrality was questioned? Grant answered without hesitation. Because one correction does not erase a developing conflict. Claire faced him. What conflict? Grant's voice became quieter. The one created when a contractor receives personal attention from a man whose business interests depend on her decisions. I do not make decisions for Roman. You influence how his words are understood. I influence nothing. I preserve meaning. You expect this room to believe you feel no loyalty toward him? The question landed exactly where Grant intended, not on her work. On the private space forming between her and Roman. Claire felt the heat rise beneath her collar. She did not look away. My feelings are not part of the contract. Grant's eyes sharpened. That is not an answer. It is the only answer relevant to my work. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Daniel opened a folder. Her interpretation has been reviewed against the recordings from every session. Grant turned toward him. Daniel continued. No material error has been found. Every correction she identified affected both language versions and was confirmed by counsel. The senior representative from Veracruz looked at Grant. Did your office submit the concern? Grant's expression remained smooth. I have no knowledge of Keystone's internal process. That was not the question. Grant paused. Roman finally moved. He placed the liability memorandum on the table. Since we are discussing disclosure, he said we should discuss what your client failed to disclose. Grant became still. Daniel distributed copies of the memorandum. The room filled with the sound of turning pages. Claire put the headset back on. Daniel explained the concealed cargo losses, conflicting inspection reports, and undisclosed civil exposure connected to 3 distribution terminals. Claire translated each sentence. The representatives from Veracruz read faster. One of them spoke in Spanish. Claire carried the question into English. He wants to know when your office learned about these inspection records. Grant did not answer immediately. His attorney leaned toward him. Roman watched without expression. The senior representative spoke again. Claire translated. He is asking whether the current draft was prepared while these liabilities were known. Grant closed the memorandum. The exposure is disputed. Daniel's voice remained controlled. The records are documented. Claire translated the final word with deliberate precision. Documented. The same word Grant's draft had attempted to remove. The senior representative turned toward Grant. You told us the exposure had been resolved. It is being resolved. That is not the same statement. Claire translated. Grant looked at her. For the first time, there was no courtesy in his face. Roman rested one hand beside the memorandum. The agreement may continue under 3 conditions. The room waited. The language is corrected. The liability is formally disclosed. The unsupported concern against Claire Bennett is withdrawn in writing. Grant looked at him. You are allowing an interpreter to dictate commercial terms. Roman's voice remained quiet. No, I am requiring you to correct the damage you created outside the agreement. Grant turned toward the consortium. We can address the professional issue separately. Claire spoke before Roman could answer. No. Every face turned toward her. Grant's expression hardened. Claire removed the headset again. A private withdrawal is not enough. The concern entered my professional record. The correction must enter it too. Grant folded his hands. The matter was a misunderstanding. No, Claire's voice stayed even. A misunderstanding suggests equal confusion. Your concern was unsupported. The written withdrawal will say so. Grant looked at Roman. Roman gave him nothing. Claire had the floor. Grant's attorney drafted the first statement. Claire read it. The document said that her neutrality could not be conclusively questioned. She placed it back on the table. That language still leaves suspicion in the record. The attorney prepared a second version. It stated that there was insufficient evidence to continue the review. Claire rejected it. You are describing an investigation that failed to prove something. There was never evidence to begin with. Grant's jaw tightened. What language do you require? Claire looked directly at him. The truth. The final version took 11 minutes. It confirmed that Claire had been assigned independently. It stated that no evidence supported a conflict of interest. It acknowledged that her interpretation had been accurate, professional, and neutral. It described the concern as unsupported and requested that no restriction be placed on her future work. Grant read the document. For the first time since Claire entered the tower, he looked tired. He signed. Claire scanned the statement and sent it to Keystone. She remained standing beside the table until her phone vibrated. Rachel had replied. The document had been received. The review was suspended immediately. Claire placed the phone face down. Roman looked toward Grant. Now we finish the contract. The corrected drafts returned to the table. Port access, inspection responsibility, cargo liability, suspension rights, governing language. Claire translated every final clause. No one interrupted her. No one questioned the pauses. When the last provision matched in both versions, Daniel placed the signature pages in front of Roman. Roman signed. The consortium representatives followed. Grant signed last. The agreement was complete. Chairs moved back. Documents entered cases. The opposing team left in silence. Grant paused at the door. He looked at Claire. She held his gaze. He said nothing. The doors closed behind him. Claire removed the headset. The room was suddenly too quiet. For the first time in 3 days, her hands were completely still. Roman stood across the table. You kept your seat. Claire looked at the signed withdrawal. You kept your promise. Roman glanced toward the door Grant had used. It was harder. Then what his eyes returned to hers, then making the problem disappear. Claire held his gaze. Good. A quiet sound left him, not quite laughter, closer than before. Claire looked down at the signed withdrawal on the table. For 3 days, every person in that room had measured her timing, her clothing, her silence, her proximity to Roman. Now the final document carried Grant Mercer's signature beneath a statement he had never intended to make. Claire Bennett had been assigned independently. Her interpretation had been accurate. The concern against her had no factual basis. The words were not an apology. They were better. They were evidence. Daniel entered the room with his phone in one hand. Keystone confirmed receipt. The review has been closed. Claire looked at him. Closed or suspended closed, and the restriction on future executive assignments removed. Daniel handed her the phone. An email from Keystone's compliance office filled the screen. Her professional standing had been fully restored. No adverse note would remain in her file. The company would contact any client who had received notice of the review. Claire read the message twice. 8 years of work had been threatened by one quiet allegation. Now, for the first time since the email arrived in the middle of the night, she could breathe without feeling pressure beneath her ribs. She returned the phone. "Thank you." Daniel gave a small nod. It was not warmth. It was respect, and from him that carried more weight. "The signed contracts are being copied," he said. "Vale Atlantic will retain 1 English version and 1 Spanish version. Both will be certified as equally controlling." Claire glanced toward the conference table. "Make certain the certification language matches." Daniel almost smiled. "I assumed you would say that." He left them alone. Roman remained across the table. The afternoon sun had moved beyond the river, filling the conference room with pale gold light. Without the attorney's executives and guards, the space seemed less like a battlefield. Claire began gathering her notes. Roman watched her close the first folder. "You are leaving. The meeting is over." "I know." His tone made the simple answer feel like something else. Claire slid the signed withdrawal into her portfolio. "You do not sound pleased. I am pleased that you won. I did not win alone." "No." Roman moved closer. "But no one else could have stood where you stood." Claire fastened the portfolio. "You wanted to speak for me." "Yes." "You wanted to end the problem without telling me how." "Yes." "You hated waiting." "Yes." The honesty pulled a faint smile from her. Roman noticed. "You find that amusing. I find it unusual. What a man like you admitting he was wrong 3 times in less than a minute." "I did not say I was wrong." Claire lifted an eyebrow. Roman's expression changed. "Not in those exact words. There it is." He looked toward the doors. "I was wrong." The sentence came quietly. Claire stopped moving. Roman had issued threats with less effort. He had controlled rooms with a glance. Yet those 3 words seemed to cost him something he could not hide. Claire rested one hand on the back of the chair. "What would you have done if the memorandum had failed?" Roman did not answer immediately. The silence no longer frightened her. She understood it now. He was not searching for the safest lie. He was deciding how much truth he could place in her hands. "I would have asked you," he said, before acting yes. Even if my answer made the situation harder, his gaze held hers. Especially then. Claire believed him, not because Roman Vale had become harmless. He had not. Power remained in every controlled movement. Danger remained in the way security waited outside the doors and in the way Grant had known better than to challenge him directly. But Roman had stopped. He had listened. He had allowed Claire to remain visible when every instinct in him had demanded that he hide her behind his protection. For a man who controlled outcomes, restraint was not passivity. It was a decision. The following morning, Keystone called at 8:12. Claire stood in her kitchen holding a cup of coffee while trains moved beyond the windows. Rachel's voice sounded careful. "The compliance review has been formally removed from your record. I received the confirmation. We are also restoring your priority status for executive assignments." Claire looked at the city waking beyond the glass. "Restoring it suggests I lost it." Rachel was silent. Claire continued. "I want written confirmation that no client was told I had been suspended for misconduct." "You were never accused of misconduct. My assignments were placed under review because someone submitted an unsupported concern. I understand." "No." You understand now because the person who created the concern admitted it had no factual basis. Rachel exhaled. You are right. The apology sounded difficult. Claire let the silence remain. Rachel continued. Compliance is willing to review its contractor protection procedures, then recommend that interpreters receive the factual basis of any allegation before their work is restricted. I will, and require written records for anonymous professional concerns. That may be more complicated. Complicated does not mean unnecessary. Rachel paused. I will include it. Claire took a drink of coffee. Make certain the review is documented. Rachel laughed once before stopping herself. I should have expected that. Yes. After the call, Claire opened her laptop. 3 new assignments waited in her inbox. A medical arbitration, a municipal contract review, a shipping conference in Baltimore. Her life had not returned to what it had been before Vale Tower. That version of her life no longer existed. Grant had tried to make Roman's attention look like corruption. Instead, Claire had forced both men to recognize that attention did not create ownership. At noon, Daniel Shaw called. Vale Atlantic would like to offer you a permanent position. Claire leaned back in her chair. As an interpreter, senior language and contract specialist, you would oversee bilingual negotiations and review all controlling documents. He named the salary. Claire looked at the train passing beyond her window. The offer was more than generous. It would give her stability benefits and access to negotiations most independent interpreters never entered. It would also place her directly inside Roman's world. I appreciate the offer. Daniel waited. But I am declining. May I ask why, if I accept a permanent position immediately after Roman defended me, Grant's allegation becomes easier to repeat? Grant no longer has influence over this agreement. He does not need influence. He only needs a story people find convenient. Daniel was quiet. What would you accept independent contract work? No exclusivity, written professional boundaries, no private security without my consent, no access to my home address, no interference with my other clients. You prepared terms. I listen to attorneys for a living. Daniel's voice carried restrained amusement. I will send a draft, send both language versions. I assumed you would require that. 2 days later, Claire returned to Vale Tower. The weather had changed. Sunlight covered the lobby floor. The silver sculpture no longer looked like blades. The guard behind the security desk checked her identification. Early again. Claire met his eyes. I am developing a reputation. This time he smiled. Roman waited in the conference room. No documents covered the table. No opposing team sat beneath the lights. Only a short contract rested beside his hand. Claire placed her portfolio down. You agreed to my terms. I changed one. Her expression cooled. Which one? Roman pushed the document toward her. The security clause stated that Claire could request protection at any time, but none would be assigned without her knowledge unless a verified immediate threat existed. Even then, she had to be informed as soon as safely possible. Claire read it again. You added a disclosure requirement. Yes, that is not the change I expected. You expected me to challenge the restrictions. I expected you to dislike them. I dislike several. Claire looked up, and Roman picked up a pen. I agreed anyway. He signed the contract. Claire signed beneath him. Their professional relationship now existed on paper. Clear, limited, chosen. Claire closed the folder. There is something I still do not understand. Roman waited. Why did you clear the room when I walked in? For the first time that afternoon, he looked toward the windows. Everyone who enters my rooms prepares an image. Claire remained silent. They practice confidence. They decide how much fear to show. They arrange their faces before the doors open. And I failed. No. Roman turned toward her. You entered terrified, soaked late, and furious with yourself. You had no image left to protect. That sounds flattering. You still walked to your station. Claire felt the memory return. The 16 faces, the fallen pen, the cold fabric against her skin. Roman continued. You did not ask the room to forgive you. You did not ask me to rescue you. You looked as if the world had already given you permission to fall apart, and you decided it could wait. Claire lowered her eyes. I cleared the room because I needed to know whether you were frightened of the meeting or frightened of whoever sent you. And what did you decide? You were frightened of failing yourself? The answer struck deeper than she expected. Claire had spent years turning fear into preparation. Roman had seen the fear before he saw the competence. He had not confused one for the other. The contract between them had ended. The room held no professional reason for either of them to remain. Roman stepped away from the table. "Have dinner with me." Claire looked at him. That sounds like an instruction. His mouth moved slightly. "Would you have dinner with me?" "Why? Because I want one conversation where neither of us is being paid to understand the other." Claire studied him. "I choose the restaurant." "Agreed. Your security stays outside." Roman hesitated. Claire waited. "One man," he said, "across the street. He remains close enough to see the entrance. And he eats." Roman's eyes narrowed. "You negotiate everything, only things that matter." 3 nights later, Claire sat inside a small Italian restaurant in South Philadelphia. The walls were covered with old family photographs. The tables stood close together. Someone in the kitchen argued loudly about garlic. A waiter moved between customers carrying plates heavy with pasta and red sauce. No one lowered their voice. No one watched the door. Roman entered alone. Across the street, Ethan sat near a window with a plate in front of him, looking deeply dissatisfied with the arrangement. Inside, the conversations continued. No one stood when Roman passed. No one cleared a path. For the first time since Claire had met him, Roman entered a room that did not belong to him. He reached the table. Claire watched him glance around. "Uncomfortable?" she asked. "Unfamiliar. You survived. Barely." He sat across from her. The waiter placed a handwritten menu in front of him and walked away. Roman studied the Italian names. Claire waited. After several seconds, he looked up. "What should I order? You control freight routes across half the East Coast, and a menu defeats you. I know when to rely on a specialist." Claire pointed to one of the dishes. "Order that." "What is it?" She leaned back. "Trust the interpreter." Roman did not look at the menu. He looked at her. "I already do." Outside Philadelphia, traffic moved through the warm evening. Across the street, Ethan ate his dinner and pretended not to watch the restaurant. Inside, Roman waited while Claire ordered first. Days earlier, 16 men had turned when she entered a room that belonged to him. Now Roman had followed her into a room she had chosen. No one feared him there, no one obeyed him. And when Claire began to speak, he listened.